Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 201, General Reisel's Power. The elven warriors took aim and fired their arrows at her signal, increasing the number of casualties on the goblin army's side at a rapid rate. Meanwhile, a small team of beast soul warriors with ranged integrated monster traits also released their abilities. Although there were only a few of them, their offensive firepower was almost on par with the thousands of elven warriors combined. The corpses of the goblin warriors quickly piled up, and the holes they had dug up were soon filled. What ruthless monsters! They did not even hesitate to use their comrades' bodies to fill up the holes. Sunset frowned at the sight of this. She was unnerved by the heartlessness of the goblins. She quickly calmed herself. She couldn't afford to get distracted now. Switch to melee weapons, she shouted when she noticed that the goblin army was closing in. Hearing her words, the elven warriors abandoned their bows and unsheathed their blades. General Reisel stepped forward and shouted with his sword pointed to the sky. "Prepare for close combat." "Yes, sir," the elven warriors replied in unison. Their voices shook the forest. When the goblin army reached a certain distance, Reisel bellowed, "Charge!" He led the vanguard, fearlessly charging without hesitation. Following closely behind him were the elven warriors. They formed a triangle formation with Reisel as the focal point. When viewed from above, their formation looked like that of an arrowhead. "No one can stop my sword," Reisel snorted as he lunged forward, swinging his sword in a horizontal motion. Whoosh! With him at the forefront, they tore through the goblin army's formation unimpeded. No one could stop Reisel. He was like a fierce tiger hunting a flock of sheep. The biggest reason for his fearsome killing power was his sword. It was a relic-level weapon with a special engraved ability. Unlike most relic-level weapons with ranged abilities, his sword possessed the power to devour the blood of his slain enemies. The more blood his sword devoured, the stronger it amplified his physical strength. However, there was also one major problem. The more blood it devoured, the more it affected his mentality. It was like a double-edged skill, so he rarely used the sword's engraved ability. But he couldn't care less about it. He wanted to avenge the elven warriors who had fallen in the grasslands. Reisel's eyes turned red and veins protruded on his face as his sword absorbed more goblin blood. Kill! 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 His movements became even faster and his power also increased significantly. The goblin warriors and even the nearby trees weren't spared from his ferocious attacks. Meanwhile, Rosalie, who had yet to step into battle, frowned as she watched him slowly descend into madness. That idiot! She had repeatedly warned Reisel not to rely too much on his sword's engraved ability, but the latter clearly didn't heed her advice. "Your Majesty, please allow me to stop Reisel from using his sword's power." Rosalie turned her gaze to Garendel, who was standing next to her. The Elven King was observing the battle with a stern face when he heard her words. "All right," Garendel approved her request. He also didn't want to see Reisel fall into depravity. After getting the king's permission, Rosalie nodded gratefully before she rushed to join the battle. Now that he was left alone, Garendel looked at the side of the human warriors. Of the 3 transcendent knights they had, only Warwick had joined the battle. Lucas and Galliner were still waiting for the right moment to attack. They had already discussed this during their meeting. It was a strategy to preserve their strength before the arrival of the goblin monarchs. Otherwise, with all of them exhausted, they wouldn't have enough energy to fight with those dangerous monsters. As if sensing his gaze, Lucas turned his head and gave him a nod. What keen perception! Garendel thought to himself as he nodded back in response. He then moved his attention back to the battle. At this moment, thousands of goblins had already been killed and a few hundred of them were slaughtered by Reisel himself. He didn't feel a hint of remorse after killing those monsters. He didn't know if it was the aftereffects of using his sword's engraved ability, or if it was just his own hatred towards the goblins. His eyes were already bloodshot and he was also about to be consumed by madness, but he didn't notice anything since he was too focused on killing more enemies. Just then, he suddenly sensed a fearsome aura locking in on him. He stopped in his tracks and scanned his surroundings, but other than the goblin warriors charging at him, he didn't sense anything more threatening in particular. Strange. I definitely felt a frightening presence nearby. The weird sensation brought him back to reality. What is happening to me? He realized that he had been consumed by the sword's power. Damn it! I almost lost control of myself. In that instant, an overwhelming pressure descended upon him. He narrowed his eyes and looked in a certain direction. This time, he finally discovered the source of this pressure. It was a goblin monarch. However, unlike the goblin monarchs that they had fought recently, this one had a more intimidating aura. It was playing with its bone sword as it approached him with steady steps. The monster also wore a hideous smile that made him feel unsettled. This goblin monarch seems to be different. He frowned. Rizel adjusted his stance while keeping his eyes on the goblin monarch. He had a feeling that it could kill him if he was even a little bit careless. Whoosh! The goblin monarch suddenly lunged at him, brandishing its bone sword with a casual slash. A purple wind blade shot toward Rizel with lightning speed. Be careful! A familiar voice drifted into his ears. Rizel didn't attempt to block the wind blade. He twisted his body, evading it in the nick of time. Hiss! Hiss! The tree behind him melted in just a few seconds. What? Chapter 202. The engraved ability of Rosalie's daggers. Sunset, who was watching from a distance, was stunned when she saw this familiar goblin monarch. It was the monster that she had fought together with Igris. It's that thing. Rizel wouldn't be able to handle that monster on his own. She had experienced the goblin monarch's power. It was the most powerful foe that she had encountered. I must warn him. Just then, she saw Rosalie rushing toward Rizel's direction with unbelievable speed. Some goblin warriors tried to block her path, but they all died after one slash to their throats. With the Grand Elder's help, it should be fine. After knowing that Rosalie was intending to support Rizel, Sunset felt relieved. I must finish my task here and help them as soon as I can. Sunset took a deep breath and moved her focus back to her task. Meanwhile, Rizel and the goblin monarch were already engaged in a fierce battle. Their clashes caused great destruction to the forest, leveling trees and blasting massive holes in the ground with every collision. This monster is too powerful. Rizel could feel his arms going numb. He had to imbue his arms with mana to minimize the pain and the damage. The monster sent him a taunting smile. Elf, your weapon has a strange ability. My sword is still more powerful, the goblin monarch remarked with a disdainful tone. Rizel, do not fall for its taunts. Just when he was about to retort, Rosalie's voice drifted into his ears. Whoosh! Rosalie appeared beside him, looking at him with a cold expression. Grand Elder! He was surprised. She wasn't supposed to come out so soon, but it seemed like she had to step in earlier than planned because of him. Shut up and focus on the battle and do not overuse your sword's ability. Rosalie gave him a piece of her mind. Rizel didn't dare refute her words. What's the plan? He asked. Just give it your all, Rosalie responded. In the next moment, their figures blurred as they charged toward the goblin monarch. Whoosh! Whoosh! Clang! Clang! Now that Rosalie had joined the battle, the goblin monarch could no longer afford to be careless. It sensed that the elven woman was a lot more powerful. Bang! Bang! No one dared to get closer to them. At this moment, Rosalie sent a flurry of quick slashes. Whoosh! 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 An ordinary goblin monarch would have a hard time blocking her daggers, but the monster in front of her was no ordinary creature. It managed to deflect and block her attacks with minimal effort. Even with Rizel supporting her offensively, they still couldn't land a direct blow on the monster. It was very elusive. While they were battling this particular goblin monarch, the clash between the goblin army and the allied forces of the humans and elves had become more intense. More powerful goblins had already emerged, putting more pressure upon them. Galliner was forced to join the battle to lighten the load on the allied forces. A while later, the Elven King also stepped in, greatly boosting their morale. "Healers! Gather the wounded and provide them treatment," Garandel shouted to the medics. The scene had become more chaotic. The once peaceful forest had already turned into hell. More and more warriors from both sides fell as the battle progressed. The battle between Rosalie, Rizel, and the sword-wielding goblin monarch was still raging. The stamina of both elven warriors was starting to decline, greatly decreasing their battle power. The goblin monarch seemed to have sensed this, and it became even more arrogant. "Is this the extent of your abilities? I expected more from you too, but all I got was disappointment," it uttered while shaking its head. Rizel's mouth twitched upon hearing its mocking remarks. If it weren't for Rosalie's presence, he would have already used his sword's ability to make it shut its mouth. "Do not fall for its tricks. It is also exhausted," Rosalie muttered with a deep look. The goblin monarch tried to hide it, but she noticed that its speed had also slowed down. The goblin monarch's smile stiffened when it heard her words. It snorted and lunged itself toward them, brandishing its sword with terrifying force. Rosalie and Rizel quickly evaded its corrosive wind blades. Hiss! 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 Seeing that all its attacks were useless, the goblin monarch imbued more mana in its limbs, significantly boosting its speed. "Die, you hypocritical elves!" The monster bellowed with rage as it released more wind blades. Whoosh! Whoosh! Rosalie could still keep up with its attacks, but Rizel, who had been fighting for a long time, was starting to accumulate fatigue. His movements had become sluggish and he could barely evade the wind blades. "I must hold on." Rizel no longer bothered to hold back. He unleashed the power of his sword while increasing his mana output. "I'm sorry, Grand Elder, but we must end this fight soon," he shouted as he bombarded the goblin monarch with a series of explosive attacks. Rosalie frowned upon seeing his reckless actions. That fool. She also activated her dagger's power. Both daggers had the same engraved ability. Upon activation, she could wield the power of darkness. Black smoke gushed out from her daggers, and Rosalie's presence also gradually disappeared. The power of darkness improved her camouflaged ability. Soon, her presence vanished. Even the powerful goblin monarch failed to detect her, making it frown in annoyance. In its rage, it waved its sword wildly, causing even more destruction to the forest. Rizel clashed with the monster to give Rosalie the perfect opportunity to strike. Surprisingly, he managed to fight toe-to-toe with the goblin monarch. "I was only holding back earlier, you beast," Rizel shouted as he put more strength into his sword. Clang! Clang! The goblin monarch was momentarily surprised by his sudden surge of power, but it quickly understood what was happening. It sneered and responded with contempt. "Do you think this borrowed power can stop me? You are one foolish elf." Chapter 203. The monster that effortlessly killed the goblin monarch. Powered by his sword's engraved ability, Rizel launched a series of ferocious attacks on the goblin monarch. Clang! Clang! The monster managed to block his sword, but it was starting to get tired of the prolonged battle. To end things quickly, it released more mana, greatly elevating its firepower. However, Rizel was like a tough nut to crack. Even with its fearsome attacks, the elven warrior remained steady like an immovable wall. "I need to buy more time for the Grand Elder." Rizel gritted his teeth, forcing every bit of his remaining mana and energy for one final duel. His goal wasn't to win against the goblin monarch. He was aware that he wasn't strong enough to defeat this deadly monster. The goblin monarch was oblivious to his thoughts. It was so intent on killing him that it had momentarily forgotten about the female elf. "De!" The goblin monarch suddenly unleashed a huge wind blade that spanned over 5 meters. It shot toward him like a bullet, causing the air to violently fluctuate. Whoosh! Rizel no longer had the energy to block this attack, so he could only deflect it and try to change its trajectory by raising his sword in a certain angle. The purplish wind blade brushed past his sword, causing a loud shing. Shying! The force behind the wind blade forced him to kneel, but he still somehow managed to deflect the destructive blow. However, the impact almost crushed his internal organs. If he wasn't a transcendent knight, he would have already fallen, but due to his physically stronger body, he was able to preserve his life. Rizel lost consciousness after deflecting the wind blade. Meanwhile, the goblin monarch was flabbergasted. It didn't even have time to complain when it suddenly sensed an overwhelming killing intent from behind. With a turn of its head, it saw an elven woman brandishing her daggers upon him. A dark aura manifested as Rosalie emerged from the darkness. In the next moment, her daggers found their way to their target, inflicting heavy damage on the goblin monarch. Roar! The monster was enraged after receiving a gruesome wound on its chest. It had superior vitality, so it was able to survive her attacks. Even so, the wounds it had sustained had already exceeded the threshold of its endurance. It staggered and used its sword to prop itself up. I am not convinced. I do not believe that this is my limit. The monster refused to give up. Couldn't accept the fact that it had been defeated by two transcendent elves. Suddenly, an immense power burst forth from the goblin monarch. Its skin cracked, and there seemed to be a new layer of skin that was starting to take form underneath. Rosalie was stunned upon seeing this. Is it undergoing evolution? She was horrified when she thought about this, and she couldn't help but recall the words that Lucas had told them before this battle. I must stop it. She narrowed her eyes into slits. Just when she was about to make her move, a heavy, oppressive aura enveloped the entire forest. What kind of aura is this? Rosalie was terrified when she realized that she was momentarily immobilized. She couldn't move her limbs and her body wasn't listening to her. All she could do was move her eyes. When she looked up, it was then that she noticed something that made her even more terrified. Flying above her was a goblin with horns on top of its head. Its facial features were almost human-like, but the most striking thing about this creature was the pair of draconic wings on its back. The monster seemed to have noticed her gaze. It stared at her with its emotionless eyes, but it quickly retracted its gaze, treating her with utter disregard. The monster descended in front of the goblin monarch that was still in the middle of its evolution. It took a step forward and stretched its arm to grab the goblin monarch's head. And with a light squeeze, it crushed the goblin monarch's head. Rosalie felt goosebumps all over her body upon witnessing this scene. The invincible goblin monarch was easily killed by this monster. She wanted to scream and run away, but she still couldn't move her body. No one can take my place. A deep, beastly voice drifted into her ears. The monster suddenly turned its head toward her, scaring her out of her wits. No! In her moment of despair, she closed her eyes. Bang! A loud bang echoed, followed by a violent shockwave that sent her flying into the air. When she opened her eyes, she found out that she could now move her body. What happened? She stabilized herself in midair to land gracefully. She then looked ahead and saw that a human warrior was already standing in front of the winged goblin monarch. It is him, Lucas Silversword. So this is what he was waiting for. Rosalie sensed Lucas' formidable aura, which was even far stronger than her own. I will take care of this. Go and get your comrade out of here, Lucas said while keeping his eyes on his target. Rosalie snapped back to reality when she heard his voice. She nodded her head and rushed to Rizel's side. She then sent Lucas a grateful look and said, Be careful. That monster is unfathomable. I am aware, Lucas calmly replied. Rosalie no longer dallied and left while carrying Rizel to safety. After she left, Lucas and the winged goblin monarch engaged in a fierce face-off. No one made a move, as if they were silently assessing each other. This monster is near the catastrophe grade. I can feel its power by just looking at it. Will I be able to stop it? Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. He had come prepared for this battle. He had equipped the dark diamond shield and a relic-level sword. Alaric also lent him the battle armor he got from the old Marquis. He was armed to the teeth, but he still felt inferior to the monster. The monster pointed at him and uttered in a voice devoid of emotion, "I can sense your fear, human." Lucas raised an eyebrow at its words, but he didn't bother to respond. He raised his sword and pointed it toward the monster. He spoke no words, but he had conveyed his intentions to the monster. Subsequently, the both of them turned into a blur, disappearing from their previous spot. Clang, clang, clang. Lucas' sword and the monster's long sharp claws clashed repeatedly. But they were so fast that even the elite knights were having trouble keeping up with their speed. A series of booms reverberated across the forest as the two fought. At this moment, Lucas was shaken by the monster's power. "This thing isn't even at the catastrophe grade, but I can barely keep up with it even with all the relic level items I have on me." There was also one more thing that made him surprised. It was the battle armor that was lent to him by Alaric. Unexpectedly, it was capable of absorbing most of the damage, and because of this, he managed to endure the power of the monster. "I do not understand why the Lord Marquis would give something this valuable to my son." He immediately removed the useless thoughts in his mind and focused his attention on the battle. One mistake could be lethal here, so he had to be extra careful. The monster revealed a look of surprise the longer they fought. It didn't expect that a human could be this formidable. It had never faced setbacks throughout its existence, and it had successfully eliminated all the obstacles in its path. However, for the first time ever, it was struggling to destroy an enemy. It backed off a few meters and looked at Lucas with a solemn gaze as it asked, "You are the strongest I have met, human. What is your name?" "Lucas." Lucas replied before he rushed forward with his sword raised to the sky in preparation for a lethal vertical slash. Whoosh! The monster wasn't flustered. It lifted its arm and blocked his sword using its long, steel-like claws. Clang! Another earth-shaking shockwave erupted after they clashed. What followed was a battle that shook the entire forest. Both experts turned the surroundings into ruins. The towering trees and even some hills were leveled to the ground. The warriors from both armies even tacitly agreed to move further from them to avoid becoming collateral damage. Soon, both experts unintentionally created a massive crater that spanned over 100 meters in diameter due to the ferocity of their battle. It was a scene that no one would forget. Alaric, who was watching the battle from afar, was feeling worried. "Please be safe, Dad." This was after all a monster that was unheard of. One that made the difficulty of his mission go from hard to extreme. If his father was defeated, everyone would be at the monster's mercy. Chapter 204, Lucas' Brilliant Idea. While Lucas was fighting with the winged goblin monarch, the war between the goblin army and the allied forces of the humans and elves was still far from over. Alaric was still not strong enough to fight with a goblin monarch, so his task was to eliminate the goblin chieftains. He led the human warriors valiantly, letting everyone know that he had the blood of the silver swords running through his veins. "Shield bearers in front. Archers, prepare to shoot at my signal. Fire! Melee units, charge with me." Everyone was amazed by his well-timed commands. He didn't act like a young man in his late teens, but a general who had been through countless battles. Just his presence in front of the formation alone boosted everyone's morale. At this point, Alaric had already cemented an unrivaled reputation. Even the stubborn veteran warriors worshipped him. Suddenly, 3 goblin chieftains leading hundreds of goblin warriors came charging toward them. Seeing this, Alaric narrowed his eyes. "Do not falter. The warriors of the north are unbeatable," he shouted as he rushed to the front, taking the most dangerous position in the formation. Upon hearing his awe-inspiring words, everyone issued a war cry. Soon, both sides clashed and tore each other apart. Alaric fought with the 3 goblin chieftains to stop them from attacking his subordinates. With powerful foes against him, his improved dual sword technique was fully displayed. Even though he was fighting 3 goblin chieftains, he was able to keep up with them and even injure them severely. Whoosh! Whoosh! Alaric's swords had become faster and more precise after he had perfected the dual sword technique. The custom-made short sword really improved my overall combat power. After this battle ends, I must give it a fitting name. Recently, he tried to come up with a name for the short sword, but nothing was well suited, so he temporarily set it aside. Alaric avoided the attacks of the monsters and targeted one of them, chopping off its head with a clean strike to its neck. KKHHSSHHKK. The goblin chieftains attacked with even more ferocity after witnessing the death of their companion. Clang, clang, clang. However, Alaric managed to effortlessly block their attacks. He then stabbed out his sword, penetrating the chest of another goblin chieftain, killing it instantly. Now only one goblin chieftain remained. Alaric pulled his sword and kicked the dead goblin chieftain, sending it flying a couple of meters away. The remaining goblin chieftain revealed a look of fear. It took a step back while keeping its eyes on him. Alaric didn't give it the chance to escape. He lunged forward, imbued the rare steel sword with mana, and swung with his full force. Whoosh! He summoned a fearsome wind blade that cut the goblin chieftain in half. In the blink of an eye, he had killed 3 powerful monsters. Just a few months ago, I could barely kill a goblin chieftain with the help of a few knights, but now, Alaric shook off the random thoughts and went to help the warriors in killing the remaining goblins. When he joined the fray, he was like an unstoppable beast. No goblin could stop him, and those that stood in his path were killed with just a slash of his sword. Alaric stood still and looked at the corpses around him with a cold gaze. He felt no joy, for some of the northern warriors were killed in that battle. He silently prayed for their souls to be accepted in Aru's kingdom. Note: in case you have forgotten, Aru is the name of the god he worships. Meanwhile, Lucas and the winged goblin monarch had already exchanged hundreds of attacks, but both remained in top condition. Lucas had minor cuts on his face and some bruises on his chest, but these minor wounds didn't affect him. The battle armor can stop the monster's claws, but its force still leaves bruises on my body. Lucas thought to himself as he looked at the winged monster. It was a bit faster than him, and it could also fly, so inflicting damage upon it was difficult. Human, you would have already died if you didn't have that armor on you. The monster calmly spoke. Lucas didn't respond, but he inwardly agreed with its comment. The battle armor had indeed protected his life. In the next moment, the two clashed once more. Bang! The winged goblin monarch seemed to be unhappy. It released a burst of mana to its hand, clenched it into a fist, and swung with unimaginable strength. Whoosh! The air trembled and fluctuated violently as its fist approached Lucas with tremendous force. Lucas frowned and raised the dark diamond shield above him, while activating its power to enhance its defensive ability. Bang! Another shockwave erupted as the monster's fist struck his shield. Due to the force of its punch, Lucas' feet sunk deeply into the ground. Lucas' arm felt numbed after taking that blow. Luckily for him, the battle armor took most of the residual damage and evenly distributed the remaining force throughout his body. Still, the pain made him frown. Using multiple relic-level items at once consumes a lot of mana. Furthermore, this battle armor consumes twice as much mana as 2 relic-level equipment. He thought to himself. He couldn't afford to prolong the battle any longer. Thinking about this, Lucas erupted with more power. He imbued more mana into his limbs and into his sword to increase his power. Subsequently, he launched a flurry of attacks, but he couldn't even properly hit the winged goblin monarch. It is too fast. Suddenly, the monster flapped its wings and flew to the sky, circling above him like an eagle to its prey. Sweat trickled down Lucas' face as he carefully watched its movements. Without any warning, the monster dove to the ground while brandishing its sharp claws at Lucas. "It will not be easy to take me down," he shouted in his mind as he blocked its claws with his shield. He then stabbed out his sword, intending to cut off its legs. However, just like an elusive dragonfly, it twisted its body and flew off, deftly avoiding his sword. Lucas clicked his tongue. How can I even land a direct blow on this monster? It was too fast and cautious. Even though he had imbued his attacks with mana, he still couldn't touch it. Suddenly, a thought came to his mind. Hold on a minute, I think this might work. His lips curved upwards when he thought of a brilliant idea. The monster seemed to have noticed his smile, which left it baffled. It wondered why the human transcendent knight was smiling when it couldn't even touch its shadow. It circled above him, waiting for the right moment to attack. Suddenly, Lucas lowered his shield. The monster immediately took the chance and swooped down with immense force. Whoosh! However, an unexpected thing happened. Instead of blocking its claws with his shield, Lucas threw his shield and took the blow with his chest. I got you! Lucas grimaced as he grabbed the monster's body, hugging it tightly to prevent it from escaping. The battle armor managed to protect him from its sharp claws, but the force still caused him severe internal damage. The monster was shocked by the turn of events. Cunning human, release me! The winged goblin monarch was enraged. It wriggled out of his grasp, but Lucas held it firmly, refusing to let go. Die, you monster! Lucas imbued his remaining mana into his sword before stabbing it into the monster's body. The winged goblin monarch had a tough skin, but it couldn't block a relic-level sword. The sword pierced through its side and penetrated deeply. KKHSHHHK. The sword's power tore its internal organs apart, but the beast didn't die immediately. With blood leaking from its mouth, it grabbed him by the neck and tried to squeeze him to death. However, its strength gradually left its body. Despicable human! It muttered with hatred while staring deeply at him. Lucas couldn't care less about what it was feeling. He struck its face with his forehead, forcing it to let go of him. The winged goblin monarch staggered backward with Lucas' sword still firmly attached to its body. The monster kneeled, spat a mouthful of blood, and breathed heavily. Lucas' sword had punctured its lungs, making it difficult for the winged goblin monarch to breathe. I feel cold, the monster thought as it lifted its head to look at the transcendent knight. Sensing its weakening gaze, Lucas approached the monster with steady footsteps. Each step made him grimace. I think it broke my ribs, he thought as he stopped in front of the creature. You have won against me. I accept my defeat. Kill me, the monster uttered. Chapter 205 Bonus Reward. The monster's eyes trembled in the face of its impending death. All right, Lucas nodded his head. He didn't make it suffer for long and killed it with a single punch to its head. Blood and brain matter splattered all over Lucas, but his eyes remained calm. Now that the greatest danger has been eliminated, this war is over. With the collapse of the winged goblin monarch, the goblin army fell into chaos. Half of the goblin monarchs even left and retreated with their troops, leaving the goblin army with only a few thousand warriors. In the next 2 hours, the allied forces of the humans and elves took care of the remaining enemies. Undersir. Mission complete. Rewards 1,500 battle points, 50 XP, 50 stat points, equipment upgrade card X1, random trait upgrade card X1. Undersir. You have done the impossible. A bonus reward will be granted for killing the special monster. Only applies for extreme difficulty missions. You received an Elite Knight card. Alaric, who was resting against a tree, was stunned when he saw the rewards. What? There is actually a bonus reward. When his mission's difficulty was changed to extreme, he thought that the rewards were atrociously low. Now, he finally realized that he was just overthinking it. The true reward of the extreme difficulty mission lies in how he would complete his task. Alaric Silversword Elite Knight EXP 169 219/1000 Potential A. Traits: Horseback Riding C, Swordsmanship SSS, Close Combat C, Archery E, Hunting E, Tracking E, Sixth Sense E, Monster Affinity F, Mana Gathering C, Appraisal B, Strength 170, Stamina 180, Agility 180, Vitality 150, Endurance 160, Mana 230, 235, Battle Points 1960, 3460, Stat Points 67, 117. Requirements for the next advancement. 1000 EXP, 250 in all attributes, and 10,000 battle points. Do you want to use the random trait upgrade card? Yes. No. Do you want to use the equipment upgrade card on the selected item? Yes. No. Do you want to use the elite knight card? Yes. No. Alaric was eager to click yes, but he stopped himself and decisively closed the cyan screen with a thought. We won, my lord. A jubilant voice drifted into his ears. Alaric turned his head and saw Galanor leading a few elite knights from the three houses. Alaric smiled at them. He didn't want to dampen their celebratory mood. You have done your part well, everyone. I am proud of you. His words made everyone feel honored. We were only following your instructions, my lord, Baron Smith Heinrich said with a flattering smile. Lord Smith is right. We were only able to accomplish all that because of your commands, my lord. Another one piped in. It was Jared Paxley. Facing their enthusiastic praises, Alaric could only smile helplessly. He replied to them one by one before he excused himself and went to help with the extraction of the beast soul crystals. The elves promised to give them all the beast soul crystals, so he was happy to help with this simple task. Your name is Alaric, right? Suddenly, he heard someone speaking to him in the common tongue. HM? He turned around and realized that it was actually the Elven King, Garandel Greenwood. Just like all other elves, he also had handsome facial features. Alaric also noticed some resemblance between him and Ivana. Your Majesty! Alaric lowered his head. In front of the Elven King, he didn't dare to be presumptuous. Garandel nodded at him. He then observed the young man and found him more likable than when they first met. He had witnessed Alaric's valiance in battle. He was still young, but he acted like a veteran commander. Many witnessed his abilities, and he also has the formidable Lucas to back him up. I don't think any of those high elves will come to trouble him if ever my daughter decides to marry him. If it weren't for the human warriors, they would have lost this battle. He couldn't even begin to imagine what might have happened if they had fought the goblin colony by themselves. Just that winged goblin monarch alone was enough to destroy the elven army. However, such a ferocious monster still fell under Lucas' hands. Your father is still being treated by our healers, so I came to you instead. Thank you for helping us in our time of need. The elves will never forget this favor. Garandel lowered his head to express his gratitude. Some would say that it was demeaning for a king to lower his head, but to Garandel it was nothing as long as it could help him protect his kingdom. Alaric hurriedly waved his hand and replied, There is no need to be like this, your majesty. Ivana is my friend and I cannot bear to see her suffer. Besides, we are also getting rewarded for helping you. Garandel smiled upon hearing his words. I understand now, he replied with cryptic words which baffled Alaric. What did he understand? Alaric wanted to ask the Elven King, but he noticed that the latter didn't want to explain himself, so he decided not to pursue the topic. Garandel approached him and tapped his shoulder as he said, Inform your men to prepare. We will go back to the Greenwood Kingdom soon. You guys better stay and recuperate. I promise that all your injured warriors will be treated by our healers. Alaric didn't reject his kind intentions. He lowered his head and replied, Yes, your majesty. Good. Garandel chuckled and left to deal with the remaining tasks. Meanwhile, Alaric immediately gathered his men and told them to prepare for the return trip. He also instructed them to build makeshift wagons for the injured soldiers. An hour later, the allied forces left the forest and headed back to the Elven Kingdom. On their way back to the kingdom, Alaric was on horseback, acting all calm. These elves are staring at me openly. He could sense the elves' gazes on him, but he pretended like he didn't notice anything. Facing all this attention, he could only shake his head and smile bitterly. Chapter 206. Alliance? Upon returning to the Greenwood Kingdom, Garandel invited all the military officers to his treehouse except those who were injured. Everyone was baffled by the Elven King's invitation. Seeing the confusion in everyone's faces, Garandel raised his hand and said, Everyone. After gathering their attention, he continued, I have received reports from our scouts that the goblin colony had already disbanded. The goblin monarchs that survived the war took their tribes and left, causing the fragmentation of the colony. They all thought that there would be another battle, so the king's words made everyone relieved. But we cannot be happy just yet. Garendel's voice suddenly turned cold. He paused and scanned everyone's faces as he announced, "We do not know when another enemy would come to invade us, so we must expand our military forces and bolster our defenses." The war with the goblins made him realize that their military power was a bit lacking. If it weren't for Lucas and the human warriors, they would have been defeated by the goblin army. While the king told them about his plans for the expansion, Alaric just sat there in silence. The Elven King invited us here to let us know that he trusts us, but he is too naive. If it were someone else who had ulterior motives, it would have been dangerous for his kingdom. Exposing their military expansion plans like this is like telling everyone your weakness. Alaric inwardly shook his head. Garendel was a kind leader, but he was too trusting. Garendel talked for almost an hour before he switched to another agenda. The war this time would have been impossible to win without our human friends. He turned his gaze to Alaric and lowered his head. As the king of the Greenwood Kingdom, please allow me to formally express our gratitude. No elves laughed or criticized the king for lowering his head to the humans. They also thought that they deserved their gratitude, so they followed the king's example and bowed their heads. Alaric, I would like to form an alliance with your household, Garendel proposed. What? An alliance with the Elven Kingdom would bring many benefits to their household. Aside from the opportunity to make trades, they could also offer mutual military support. However, this alliance also carried some risks, so Alaric didn't rush to accept the Elven King's proposal. Seeing his silence, everyone quietly waited for him to make the decision. He was the heir of House Silversword, so he had the authority to make this decision. After a moment of silence, Alaric cleared his throat and replied, "Thank you for the proposal, Your Majesty. As the heir of House Silversword, I accept your offer to form an alliance." He had thought it through. Other than gaining military support and potential business partnerships, being allied with the elves will help us expand our reach to the Enchanted Woodlands. The Enchanted Woodlands was the home of numerous powerful creatures and dangerous monsters, so no one dared to venture deeply into this land. But with the elves' support, things might be different. Alaric didn't reveal his thoughts. He only expressed his agreement to form an alliance, which made the elves happy. He felt a bit guilty when he saw their reaction. "Great! Once your father has recovered, we will formalize this agreement." Garendel couldn't conceal his joy. "Once we are allied with House Silversword, we do not need to be afraid of being attacked again." He also had some ulterior motives in making this proposal, but what he didn't know was that this decision would one day cause massive changes to the power structure of the Enchanted Woodlands. "Alaric, is there anything that you want? Tell me and I will do my best to make it happen." Garendel felt that the rewards they had promised were too low, so he decided to grant Alaric's wish on a whim. Hearing this, Alaric was taken aback, but he didn't show it to his face. "I was thinking about how I should ask them to engrave an ability on my short sword. It seems like I do not need to go through so much trouble." He thought to himself as he replied to the king, "Your Majesty, I do have something that I want. I am listening. Go on." "It is like this. I have a weapon here that I want to be engraved with an ability, so I would like to ask one of your beast soul warriors to help me with this." Alaric grabbed the custom-made short sword strapped to his waist and showed it to the Elven King. Garendel could already tell at a glance that the sword was made of special materials. "Bring your sword over," he beckoned to Alaric. Alaric nodded and approached the king. He then handed him the short sword without hesitation. The elves might be arrogant, but they were trustworthy. "Good sword. Weight, this texture and this coldness." He discovered that it was made of mithril and another material with inherent cold attributes. "You have a good sword. It must have been made by a great artisan," Garendel praised as he handed back the sword. Alaric couldn't help but think about the drunkard, Gorin, when he heard the Elven King's words. With a light chuckle, he nodded. "The sword was indeed crafted by our household's best blacksmith." "No wonder," Garandel rubbed his chin. All right. Tell me which ability you want to be engraved on this sword. He stared deeply at Alaric, curious to know his decision. Alaric already knew which ability he wanted for the sword, so he quickly gave his response. I would like Sir Neos' ice manipulation ability, Your Majesty. He had seen stronger integrated monster traits, but he felt that Neos' ice manipulation was perfect for the sword. Garandel was surprised by this, but he immediately understood the reason for his choice. I see. You made a great choice. Neos' ice manipulation is indeed the most fitting ability for your sword. After saying those words, Garandel turned his head to Neo. What do you think, Neo? Chapter 207. I think I need a massage. Neo also participated in the war and he had sustained light injuries, but to a three-ringed beast soul master like him, his injuries were like tiny scratches. I have no objections, Your Majesty. Lord Alaric is our benefactor, so I am willing to fulfill his request. Neo responded with a nod. Garandel smiled upon hearing his response. Good. Thank you for accepting my selfish request, Sir Neo. Alaric cupped his fists with a look of gratitude. He had gotten another equipment upgrade card after completing the extreme difficulty mission. He wondered if he could get another epic-level item. Just the thought of it made him feel excited. Neo waved his hand. Please hand me the sword. Alaric walked toward him and handed the sword over. Upon receiving the sword, Neo calmly told him, I will return it tomorrow. Alaric nodded at his words. All right. Please be careful and do not exhaust your mana. Engraving one's integrated monster trait to an equipment wasn't easy, and it also carried serious risk. Alaric didn't want him to suffer mana-related injuries for his sake. Amen. Neo hummed in response. After this conversation, Garandel ended the meeting with a short speech. Alaric rushed to his designated treehouse and immediately used his random trait upgrade card. Do you want to use the random trait upgrade card? Yes. No. Alaric clicked yes without hesitation. Congratulations. Your monster affinity, F, trait has been upgraded to monster affinity, E. Alaric raised an eyebrow when he saw what had been upgraded. It was a trait that he had rarely used, but he wasn't too disappointed since it could also help him in certain situations. Too bad. I am just too unlucky. I wonder when I can upgrade my close combat and/or my sixth sense. These two traits were the most useful after his swordsmanship trait. They were very crucial in battles, especially his sixth sense trait, which had helped him overcome many dangerous situations. Should I use the Elite Knight card? He was still in Elven territory, so he was afraid that his secret would be revealed if he used the card. Alaric contemplated deeply. I will hold on to it for now. He felt that it was too risky, so he decided to temporarily put it aside. Just then, he suddenly heard a series of knocks on his door. Knock! 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 Alaric, it is me. When he heard Ivana's voice behind the door, he quickly walked over to open it. Ivana, how are you? Alaric smiled upon seeing her beautiful face. I am all right. I heard that you fought in the vanguard, so I am here to check on your condition. But it seems like you are doing well. Ivana answered while checking if he had sustained injuries. Hearing this, Alaric's lips subconsciously curved upward. Actually, my muscles feel a bit sore right now. He didn't know why, but he felt the urge to tease this elven princess. Ivana furrowed her eyebrows, but she didn't notice the strange look in his eyes. Is there any way I can help you? She asked. Alaric thought for a moment and replied. Now that you mention it, I think a massage will help me relieve this feeling of soreness. Ivana blushed upon hearing this. She clenched her fist and responded in a mosquito-like voice. All right. How should I massage you? Alaric widened his eyes. He wasn't serious when he said those words, and he only meant it as a joke. But she actually took it seriously. You can just massage my back. He tested the waters while observing her reaction. Ivana gritted her teeth and nodded, her cheeks reddening. Okay. Sit down and turn around. She spoke coldly to mask her nervousness. Okay. Alaric quickly followed her instructions. He took his seat and turned his back on her. She actually agreed. Ivana took a deep breath and approached him. I have not done this before, so I might not do well. Please forgive me, she muttered. It is fine. Just do it at your own pace. Alaric chuckled and gestured at her to relax. Ivana nodded. She then nervously stretched out her hands to his back. When she touched his back and felt his warmth, she felt like she was electrocuted. It was like she was invading a forbidden territory. Alaric could feel her hands shaking, but he didn't say anything to save her from embarrassment. Suddenly, he felt a wave of comfort when an unknown energy began to flow from her hands to his back. Noticing his surprise, Ivana smiled and explained. Just relax. This is my integrated monster trait. It has many uses, and this is just one of them. That is wonderful, Alaric exclaimed. He remembered that her integrated monster trait was an S-rated trait called Nature's Blessing, but he had no idea what it could do. From the looks of it, her integrated monster trait must be a versatile ability with numerous applications. Amen. Many people helped me to get this ability, she replied in a soft tone. Alaric chatted with her to make her feel more comfortable. However, their little moment was interrupted by a series of knocks on the door. Knock! 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 Ivana was startled, and she subconsciously distanced herself from Alaric. I think I should leave now, Alaric. I do not want others to misunderstand our relationship. She spoke with a trace of reluctance. I see. Then let me see you out. Alaric stood up while silently cursing whoever was outside the door. He then walked to the door with Ivana closely following behind him. The moment he opened the door, he saw Baron Smith standing next to an elven elite knight. My lord! Baron Smith was stunned when he saw Alaric stepping out of his treehouse with the elven princess. The elf who had come with him was similarly shocked to see Ivana. Your Highness! Ivana didn't bother to explain herself. She looked at Alaric and said, I will come and see you tomorrow. She didn't wait for his response and left with quick strides. Seeing this, Alaric could only watch her in silence. He then turned his head toward the two who had come for him. Lord Smith, you better give me a good explanation for interrupting my time with Her Highness. Chapter 208. Tempted by the elven ladies to bath at the river. Baron Smith was at loss for words, but when he saw Alaric's annoyed face, he could only bite the bullet. Everyone wants to celebrate our victory, so I came here to invite you. Fine. I will be there later. Alaric snorted and went back to his treehouse with a slam of the door. Smith Heinrich could only smile bitterly as he thought to himself. It seems like I have inadvertently offended Lord Alaric. Meanwhile, the elf who had come with him was still reeling in shock. He couldn't believe that the cold and indifferent princess had actually entered someone's treehouse. Let us go, buddy. Smith tapped the elven warrior's shoulder with a forced smile on his face. All right. An hour later, Alaric's annoyance finally subsided. He searched for the others and found them drinking the elves. It was a harmonious scene, something that had never happened in his past life. What are you guys drinking? He asked as he approached them. My lord! Jared Paxley eagerly walked to his side with a gourd of what seemed to be elves' version of beer. Sensing Alaric's gaze, Jared handed him the gourd and said with a smile, My lord, this is the specialty drink of the Greenwood Kingdom, the Bejeweled Nectar. It has a strong flavor, and I heard that it also improves health. Amazing, right? Why don't you give it a try? Is it really that good? Alaric hesitated, but when the unique aroma of the drink assailed his nostrils, he couldn't resist the temptation anymore. He brought the gourd to his mouth and took a swig of the so-called specialty drink of the elves. Wow, it definitely has alcohol in it, but the taste is vastly different compared to what we drink in the Empire. This one has a fruity taste to it, almost like juice. It also packs quite the punch once it travels down your throat. Alaric could already smell a big business opportunity from this drink. I am sure the others had also thought of this, but they would not dare do this business without my House Silverwood's permission. I love it! Alaric exclaimed with a look of enjoyment. I knew you would love it. Jared laughed heartily upon hearing his words. My lord, The elves have more drinks like this. Although not as good as the bejeweled nectar, they are still much better than most drinks in our empire. Why don't we? His voice trailed off, but his message was clear. He wanted House Paxley to do this business. Alaric stared deeply at him and responded in a calm voice. Let us talk about this later with Lord Smith. I do not want him to think that I am favoring you. Jared nodded in understanding. Yes, my lord. It was a good sign. Although they might have to share the business with House Heinrich, Jared didn't mind. He knew that they would still earn a lot once these drinks hit the shelves. Alaric joined the celebration with the warriors. Everyone shared their happiness, and they also expressed their sorrows for those who had died in the battle. The celebration lasted until the next morning, but Alaric returned to his treehouse before midnight to get some rest. The next day, Alaric was awoken by the sunlight that seeped through the gaps of the window. Surprisingly, his head didn't hurt even though he had drunk a lot last night. Another day, but I still cannot complete my daily mission. He sighed and shook his head with a regretful smile. He jumped out of the bed and stepped out of the treehouse to get some clean water to wash his body with. The elves didn't build bathrooms in their treehouses since they only took a bath in the river or the lake. Alaric felt uncomfortable with all the filth on his skin, so he wanted to freshen up a bit. Within the Greenwood Kingdom, there was a river that was connected to one of the biggest lakes in the Enchanted Woodlands, the Astral River. Alaric was headed to this river while carrying a small basin. He encountered some elves along the way. Some of them enthusiastically greeted him, but others ignored him and just went their way without saying a word. Some elves are still guarded toward us, but this will soon change the more we interact with them. Alaric didn't think negatively about this encounter. He understood the inherent dislike of the elves toward the humans, and it wasn't something that could be changed overnight. When he arrived at the river, he saw some elven women who were bathing with nothing but a thin fabric that only covered their chests and intimate parts. He almost had a nosebleed when he saw this visually striking scene. The elven women noticed his gaze, but they didn't seem to care. A few of the beauties even waved their hands, inviting him to join them. Alaric reluctantly refused them. He really wanted to join them, but he felt that something bad would happen if he did. After filling the basin with water, he quickly fled and returned to his treehouse. Damn! I almost fell into their temptations. Alaric wiped off his sweat the moment he returned to the treehouse. He hadn't touched a woman since his regression, so he felt a wave of discomfort in a certain area. He chanted a religious mantra to calm his mind. Aru, please forgive your sinful believer. Alaric removed his clothes and rinsed his body clean with the water from the river. He then used the scented soap he had brought with him. That feels better. Alaric wiped his body dry with a towel before he changed into a new set of clothes. Just then, he heard a series of knocks on his door. Knock! 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 Hold on. I am coming, said Alaric as he walked toward the door. Upon pushing the door open, he saw an elven warrior standing outside. Good morning, my lord. Elder Neo sent me here to deliver this. The elven warrior handed him his short sword. Chapter 209, Epic Mithril Short Sword. It is finally done. He really did it in just one day. Alaric excitedly took the sword from the elven warrior. Please thank Elder Neo for me. I will visit him later to express my gratitude. I will relay your message to the elder. The elven warrior nodded, turned around, and left. Alaric wanted to try his sword right away, so he went to a secluded corner to unsheath his sword. Shying. Nothing changed with the blade except for the inscriptions added by Neo. He could already feel the strong power of ice emanating from the sword even though he hadn't imbued it with his mana. The sword has become a relic-level weapon after Sir Neo engraved it with his Ice Manipulation integrated monster trait. Do you want to use the equipment upgrade card on the selected item? Yes. No. A series of notifications appeared in front of him. This time, Alaric didn't hesitate and quickly clicked, yes. Congratulations. You have upgraded your rare mithril short sword to an epic mithril short sword. Epic Mithril Short Sword. Sharpness, 75. Durability, 50. Alaric was flabbergasted by the sword's sharpness. It was actually more than 3 times sharper than his rare steel sword. The sword felt colder to touch, but there was no change to its weight. It was still light as a feather. There were also some changes to the blade. There were splashes of blue on the blade, looking like sharp fragments of ice. Alaric tested the sword's balance and found out that it was easier to wield now. Furthermore, with every slash, it would leave a wave of cold air. In a prolonged battle, this could make his enemies uncomfortable, and it would even hinder their movements once the coldness accumulated. Now let us test the sword with mana. He injected his mana into the sword, making the inscriptions on the blade light up with a bright ocean blue color. The coldness of the sword also intensified, but it released an energy that made him immune to the coldness. It was as if the sword had a mind of its own, and it didn't want its wielder to suffer. Alaric released a few slashes, and each strike created petals of ice that could freeze an ordinary person. This is one scary power, Alaric exclaimed in shock. He continued testing the sword, and this time he activated the engraved ability. Whoosh! The ground started freezing when he struck it with his sword. In the next moment, sharp icicles burst forth and flew in all directions. What fearsome ability! It is powerful, but I need to master it first. Otherwise, my allies will also be injured every time I use it. Alaric was satisfied with the improvements in his sword. Now, I need to give it a proper name. Alaric pondered deeply, and after almost an hour of thinking, his eyes lit up. Frigid Dragon Sword. He felt that it was the most fitting name among all the names he had come up with. From now on, you will be called Frigid Dragon. As if to respond to his words, the sword emitted a more brilliant blue light. Alaric played around with it until he was satisfied. When he sheathed his sword, he noticed that the surrounding trees were already covered by a layer of frost. Oops! He couldn't just leave them be, so he immediately used mana to melt the ice. After removing all the layers of frost on the trees, he left and went to look for Smith Heinrich and Jared Paxley. He wanted to discuss the new business plan with them. After he left, a figure appeared on top of a tree. She was dressed in dark-colored clothes, and there was a pair of daggers strapped on her legs. Alaric Silversword, what an interesting young man. She stared deeply at Alaric's disappearing back view. When she could no longer see him, she turned into a blur and disappeared with a whoosh. Alaric found Smith and Jared fishing by the astral lake with some elven warriors they had made friends with. My lord! Smith Heinrich was the first to notice him. Lord Alaric! His son, Dylan Heinrich, was also there. The guy stopped what he was doing and approached Alaric with a big smile on his face. Is this still the glorious Dylan Heinrich that I once knew? Alaric smiled bitterly. He didn't know if Dylan would still become the man that he was in his past life. No, he will be stronger in this life with my support. Alaric was certain of this. House Heinrich had been the most supportive ally, so he planned to reward them with more resources. With enough resources, he believed that Dylan would become an elite knight faster than he did in his past life. Lord Smith, Lord Jared, I would like to speak with you about something important. Can we talk somewhere more quiet? Alaric glanced at the two with a stern look. Hearing this, Smith and Jared could already guess what this was all about, so they nodded at his request. They went further from the others for some privacy before they began their conversation. I am sure you can already guess what this is all about, but just to make sure that we are on the same page, I will say it. The bejeweled nectar and the other elven delicacies. I want to introduce them to the Empire's market. I cannot do this on my own, so I would like to ask for your cooperation. Alaric stated his intentions. It will be an honor to cooperate with you in business, my lord. The two immediately expressed their desire to work together. This was a big opportunity for their households, something that would significantly increase their financial prospects. Good. Alaric smiled faintly. Then let us discuss how we should divide the profits. His eyes narrowed into slits. Although he was willing to share the business, he wanted to gain more for his household. Chapter 210, Visiting Lucas at the Clinic. It took them slightly over an hour to decide how the profits would be distributed. As the main contributor, House Silversword would take most cut while the two households would receive less even if they combined their shares. Furthermore, both households would also have to cough up the capital to start the business. Despite the unreasonable distribution of shares, both House Heinrich and House Paxley were willing to take the risk. They were confident in the success of the business, so they agreed with Alaric's terms. After their discussion, Jared and Smith continued fishing with the elven warriors, while Alaric headed to the clinic to check his father's condition. The clinic was near the central square of the kingdom, and Alaric happened to encounter some elven warriors. "It's Lord Alaric! Lord Alaric!" The elven warriors stopped to greet him. They had witnessed the human warriors' ferocity and skills in battle, but the ones who stood out were Lucas and Alaric. The former displayed his unrivaled power, and he had even killed a monster that was about to cross the catastrophe grade. On the other hand, Alaric showcased his amazing leadership that was worthy of praise. Alaric waved his hand at the elven warriors. He smiled at them and asked, "Can you guys tell me where the clinic is located? I have been walking around for a while, but I am not familiar with the road." Hearing this, one of them immediately responded, "You just need to go straight, my lord. At the end of this path you have to turn left." "Thank you. I will see you guys later." Alaric cupped his fists at the elven warriors before he left. He followed the direction that the elven warriors had told him, and he soon found himself in front of a big treehouse. From outside, he could already smell the heavy scent of herbs and medicine. The elven warriors guarding the clinic didn't stop him from entering. A while later, Alaric found Lucas inside one of the rooms. Due to the large number of injured soldiers, his father had to share the room with a human warrior and 3 elven warriors. Furthermore, all of them were familiar faces. Dahan Igris and, who is this guy again? Is it Arsel or something? Whatever. As for the human warrior, it was someone from House Heinrich. The guy was heavily injured, so the elves sent a one-ringed beast soulmaster with a healing integrated monster trait to monitor his condition. "My lord." Alaric bowed to Lucas. The latter was already in better condition, but he still needed a week to fully recover. This made Alaric feel relieved. "Alaric, how are you, son?" Lucas smiled upon seeing him. He beckoned to Alaric and gestured at him to sit on the chair next to his bed. Alaric took his seat and replied, "I have been well, my lord. I got Sir Neo to engrave an ability on my short sword." While saying this, he grabbed the frigid dragon sword and handed it to Lucas. Lucas was surprised when he felt the coldness of the sword. He hadn't even unsheathed the sword, but it was already emitting intense coldness that could greatly affect ordinary people. This is not an ordinary relic-level sword. He could tell that it had already exceeded the power of a relic-level weapon. Lucas slowly pulled the sword from the scabbard, revealing an incredibly sharp blade with splashes of blue. "Good sword." The sword's icy attribute was enhanced by Sir Neo's engraved ability. "You should thank him. He must have consumed a lot of energy during the engraving process," said Lucas as he handed the sword back to Alaric. "Yes, my lord. I will visit Sir Neo later to express my gratitude." Alaric nodded in agreement. "You should leave. There is nothing for you to do here. The healers are taking care of us, so you do not need to worry." Lucas waved his hand, signaling for him to leave. Alaric was already satisfied to see his father recovering well, so he didn't linger for long and left after bidding him farewell. After Alaric left, Rizel, who had his eyes closed, suddenly sat up straight. He then looked at Lucas and said, "You have a good son, Lord Lucas." Rizel also had a son, but he didn't possess a soul mark and he wasn't cut out to become a warrior. He envied Lucas for having an amazing son like Alaric. Lucas. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.